Picture this. A man sits alone in a quiet, concrete room, lit by a single bare bulb. He is called Kim Jun-ho. In the Seoul underworld, they whisper his nickname, the Shadow. His face is all hard lines and old scars, and his suit, though expensive, is stained from the evening's work. This is a man made of ice and violence, an architect of fear, who, in 38 years, has never shed a single tear. Not for his enemies, not for his friends, not even at his own family's funeral. His eyes are empty. But tonight, something's different. From a tiny speaker on a metal table, a simple, haunting melody plays. It's just a piano and a woman's soft voice. And as the song hits its peak, the impossible happens. A single tear escapes from his eye. It carves a clean path through the grime on his cheek. This is the story of that tear, the first and only one ever shed by Kim Jun-ho. And it's the story of the blind girl whose song, without ever knowing it, brought a monster to his knees. But to understand why this one tear matters so much, we have to rewind 48 hours. Before the music, before the memory it unlocked. We have to go back to Jun-ho's world of gray and red, a world where feelings are a weakness that can get you killed. We have to go back to the moment just before a ghost from his past, carried on the notes of a forgotten song, showed up to collect a debt of sorrow that had been buried for 30 years. Kim Jun-ho wasn't just a man. He was a change in the weather, a sudden chill you'd feel in a crowded room. His empire was built on silence, on the unspoken threat that lingered long after he'd left. In Seoul's criminal underworld, where loud talk and flashy suits were for lesser men, Jun-ho was a phantom. His orders were quiet, one-word commands that hit with the force of a tidal wave. His headquarters wasn't some gaudy mansion. It was the top floor of a bland, gray skyscraper in Uedo, a space of polished concrete and smoked glass. It was cold, clean, and brutally efficient, just like him. From his window, he could see all of Seoul spread out below, a kingdom he commanded, but felt nothing for. 48 hours before the tear, Jun-ho was staring out that window at the Han River. His right-hand man, Park, stood a few feet back, holding a tablet with security feeds. Kong made his move. Park said quietly, "He hit Warehouse 7, just like you said he would. He thinks he has you trapped." Jun-ho didn't turn. Kong was an old lieutenant whose ambition had turned into betrayal. For most bosses, this would be cause for rage. For Jun-ho, it was just a problem that needed to be solved. "And our response?" he asked, his voice flat. "The teams are ready," Park confirmed. "They're waiting for your order." Jun-ho was quiet for a long moment. "Kong thinks strength is about making noise," he said, almost to himself. "He doesn't get it. Real power is control, especially over yourself." He finally turned, his dark eyes landing on Park. "Tell the teams to move. Don't engage Kong. Just cut his men off, one by one. I want him left alone in that warehouse, surrounded by the silence of his own failure. I'll deal with him myself." Park just bowed his head. He'd seen Jun-ho walk into a room of his rivals, unarmed, and walk out with their total surrender. He'd seen him at his own father's funeral, standing before the casket with a face like granite. Park, like everyone else, thought Jun-ho was born without feelings. But he was wrong. The feelings weren't gone, they were buried, locked away in a vault deep inside him. The key had been lost 30 years ago, on a rainy night when he was just 8 years old, hiding in a kitchen pantry. Outside, his father, a man of rage and gambling debts, was tearing their small apartment apart. But through the chaos, he could hear his mother's voice, humming a simple lullaby she'd made up just for him. It was his shield. That night, the shield broke. The pantry door was ripped open, and his mother's humming stopped. The last he saw of her was her hand reaching for him before he was dragged away. The lullaby died, and with it, the part of Kim Jun-ho that knew how to feel. He never cried. Not when he learned she was gone, and not as he clawed his way from the gutter to the top of Seoul's underworld. He built his empire on that emptiness, convinced the boy in the pantry was gone forever. Miles away, in a forgotten corner of Hongdae, Era's world wasn't one of sight, but of sound. She'd been blind since a car accident at age 10 that also took her parents. The world went dark, and the music playing on the radio stopped. Now 24, Era saw the world differently. The city was an orchestra, the sigh of the subway, the hurried footsteps of a businessman, the low hum of neon signs. These were her colors, her landmarks. Her life was small, but it was her own. She lived in a tiny apartment above a bustling market, and her sanctuary was a small, dimly lit bar in a narrow alley called the Fading Note. In the corner of the bar sat an old, out-of-tune piano. This is where Era could truly see. When her fingers touched the keys, she didn't play with technical perfection. She played with pure, raw emotion. She played what she felt: longing, joy, a quiet sadness. On this particular evening, the bar was nearly empty. Era sat at the piano and began to play a melody that had come to her in a dream. It was simple, sad, but hopeful. As she played, she started to sing. Her voice wasn't powerful, but it was clear and painfully sincere. The lyrics weren't a story, just feelings: a cold window pane on a cheek, the smell of rain, the feeling of a hand letting go. In a city obsessed with image and power, Era was invisible to the thousands who rushed past her alley every day. She had no idea that her small, quiet song was about to be heard by the one man who had forgotten how to listen. Junho's takedown of Kong at Warehouse 7 was quick and brutal. Just as he'd planned, Kong was left alone and cornered. "How?" Kong spat, his voice echoing in the huge, empty space. Junho didn't bother with words. The fight was short. When it was over, he walked away, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no relief. Just the usual emptiness. But this time, something was different. A stray blow had caught him in the ribs, and a sharp pain pulsed with every breath. It was a crack in his armor, a physical reminder of his own mortality that he found deeply annoying. He dismissed his men and decided to drive himself, needing the solitude. He drove aimlessly through the city, the pain a dull throb in his side. He found himself turning into the chaotic streets of Hongdae, an area he normally avoided. He saw a dark alley, and at the end, a flickering sign: the Fading Note. The name felt right. It sounded like a place to disappear. The black sedan seemed out of place in the graffiti-covered alley. He pushed open the heavy wooden door and slipped into the darkest corner booth. He was just another shadow in a room full of them. And then he heard it. A piano. A soft, sad little tune. He was about to ignore it, but then a girl's voice joined in, singing of loss and quiet hope. Junho froze. The sound, it was like a key turning in a lock he didn't even know was there. It wasn't the song itself. It was the feeling behind it. A pure, unguarded vulnerability that he hadn't let himself get near in 30 years. It felt alien and deeply unsettling. His carefully built walls trembled. For the first time in his adult life, Kim Junho felt a flicker of something other than emptiness. And it terrified him. He looked toward the piano and saw her, a slight girl with her eyes closed in a permanent night. A blind girl, singing a song that was, for some reason, he couldn't grasp, was starting to pull his buried world apart. The song continued, each note a gentle blow against the walls around Junho's heart. He couldn't move. The pain in his ribs was replaced by a different kind of ache, a phantom limb of emotion he'd thought was long gone. As Era's voice swelled, it happened. A flash. Not a memory, just a splinter of a sensation, a woman's hand, warm and slender, brushing hair from a little boy's forehead. The faint scent of lavender. The image vanished, leaving Junho breathless, his heart pounding. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly on the floor. The music stopped. Era turned her head toward the noise. "Is everything all right?" she asked the darkness. Her spoken voice was just as unsettling. No fear, no respect, just open. Junho didn't answer. He threw a wad of cash on the bar, enough to cover everyone's drinks for a week, and fled into the night. But the girl's voice and the melody followed him. He couldn't sleep. The next day, he was completely distracted. Park watched him, concerned. Junho was staring at profit spreadsheets, but seeing a blind girl at a piano. He told himself it was a weakness he needed to crush. That evening, he drove back to Hongdae. He ditched the suit and took a seat at the bar, his face hidden in the shadows. She was there, talking to the old bartender, her laugh a light sound that felt totally alien in Junho's world. He learned her name was Era. He learned she loved the rain because it washed the city's voice clean. He was a man who gathered intel for a living, but this was different. He wasn't looking for weaknesses. He was just listening. After a while, she moved to the piano. When she finished a song, he found himself walking toward her. "The song you played last night," he said, his voice sounding rough. Era turned toward him, a small smile on her lips. "The man from the corner booth," she said. "Your footsteps are heavy. You carry a lot." She said it like she was talking about the weather. Junho was stunned. She saw more without her eyes than most people did with two. The song, he repeated. Where did you learn it? She tilted her head. I didn't learn it anywhere. It's just something I remember. Or maybe I made it up. It comes to me when I think about feeling safe in the dark. Safe in the dark. The words hit him like a punch. That's what his mother's lullaby had been. And then another memory surfaced, clearer this time. He was 8, in the pantry. He heard his mother humming. Then a crash. The humming stopped. The door was torn open. His mother was on the floor. A man grabbed him, dragging him out. His mother's eyes met his. It's okay, Junho, she whispered. Remember the song. He hadn't remembered. He had buried it. He'd buried everything. You're very quiet. Era's voice pulled him back. That song, does it mean something to you? Junho looked at her sightless eyes that seemed to see right through him. He should have walked away. But instead, he heard himself say, play it again. She smiled and turned back to the piano. As her fingers began to trace the familiar melody, Junho felt the foundations of his world start to crumble. He didn't know it yet, but the melody Era thought was hers was the same song that had been playing on the car radio the night of her accident, an accident caused by one of his own smuggling crews. The thread of fate, woven from a single song, was pulling them both toward a devastating truth. The cracks in the shadow's facade didn't go unnoticed. Kong, the man Junho had left for dead, had survived, and he was burning for revenge. He started watching Junho and discovered the unthinkable. The most feared man in Seoul was spending his nights listening to a blind piano player. For Kong, this wasn't humanity. It was a weapon. The call came to Era on a rainy afternoon. A man claiming to be from the Seoul Arts Council said a wealthy, anonymous patron wanted to offer her a private audition. The money he offered was a dream come true, enough for a new piano and a year of living expenses. It was the chance of a lifetime. She was picked up and driven to the shipyard district, to a vast, cold warehouse. In the center, under a single spotlight, sat a gleaming grand piano. It was beautiful, but as her fingers touched the keys, a deep, chilling dread washed over her. This felt like a trap. At that same moment, Junho got a message. It was a grainy photo of Era at the piano in Warehouse 7. Below it, a single line, "Come alone. The final performance is about to begin." Pure, hot rage flooded Junho's system. It was an emotion he hadn't felt in 30 years, and its intensity was stunning. It wasn't the cold anger of a betrayed boss. It was the fury of a man whose sanctuary had been violated. When he burst into the warehouse, he saw Era at the piano, pale and terrified. Kong stood beside her, a cruel smile on his face and a gun in his hand. "Welcome, boss," Kong mocked. "I thought we'd enjoy a little concert. Play for him, girl. Play the sad little song that melts the great shadow's heart." Era trembled, looking toward the sound of Junho's footsteps. "The man with the heavy heart," she whispered, the horror dawning on her face. "Play it," Kong roared, pressing the gun to her temple. "Let her go," Junho said, taking a step forward. "This is between you and me." "Oh, it is," Kong sneered. "I want you to watch. Now play." Era took a shaky breath and began to play. She wasn't playing for Kong. She was playing for the man in the shadows. And as the song filled the warehouse, the final wall inside Kim Junho collapsed. The memories flooded back. His mother's song. The car crash from an old incident report he'd barely looked at. 2 fatalities. 1 survivor, a 10-year-old girl, blinded. Her name was Era. The song. The accident. The girl. It all crashed together in his mind. A tidal wave of guilt and grief. The lullaby his mother gave him for comfort had become the soundtrack to the tragedy that ruined this girl's life. His entire world was built on her suffering. And as the final, heartbreaking note of Era's song echoed through the warehouse, the dam broke. The world fell silent. The only sound was the last piano note hanging in the cold air. Kong was laughing. He'd seen it. Everyone had. On the face of Kim Junho, the shadow, a single tear traced a slow path down his cheek. He stood perfectly still, his gaze fixed on Era. The tear wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a cataclysm. It was grief. It was guilt. It was the soul of an 8-year-old boy, finally allowed to cry. In that moment of stunned silence, Junho's own men, led by Park, flooded the warehouse. The firefight was short and brutal, but Junho didn't move. He just walked, untouched, through the chaos, his eyes never leaving Era. When the silence returned, Only Junho, Era, and Park were left. Junho slowly knelt in front of her. He reached out, his calloused, blood-stained hand hovering for a moment before gently closing over her trembling ones on the piano keys. It wasn't a threat. It was a confession. A surrender. Era flinched, but then she felt it. A single wet drop landed on her hand. Then another. She didn't need to see. She could feel the tremors running through him, could hear his ragged breaths. The monster from the shadows was weeping. He made no sound, but his silent tears falling onto her hand spoke a language of pain so deep it felt holy. In the days that followed, the whispers started. The shadow had vanished. Kim Junho, the unmovable force, was just gone. He didn't flee the country. He moved into a small, anonymous apartment. He owned nothing but a few changes of clothes and a single, faded photograph of his mother. He never contacted Era. He knew his presence was a poison. Instead, he used his last untraceable funds to create an anonymous trust. A new piano was delivered to the fading note. The bar itself was bought and renovated. And a lifetime of living expenses appeared in Era's name. She would never know its origin. One evening, a month later, Junho sat in his small apartment, listening to a cheap portable player. It was a poor-quality phone recording of a piano and a girl's voice, singing a sad, beautiful song in an empty warehouse. As he listened, he looked at the picture of his mother. For the first time, he didn't feel the hollowness. He felt the sharp, clean pain of grief and the crushing weight of guilt. And he wept, not silent, stoic tears, but the racking, heartbroken sobs of a man finally letting himself feel everything. It was a new kind of silence in his life now. Not the cold, empty silence of a man who feels nothing, but the quiet of a man who has finally faced himself. His first tear wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning. It was the price he paid for his own humanity. If this story about a single song and the tear it caused moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories that explore the hidden corners of the human heart. Share this video with someone who believes no one is beyond saving. And let us know in the comments what you think true strength looks like. Is it the absence of tears or the courage to finally shed them?